Hello, co-journeyers, and welcome back to The Truth So Help Me Good. I am your host, Barbara Landry, and together we continue to explore some of the bigger questions about this journey we call life. Today, my special guest is Dr. Craig Yorke. He was born in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and received a BA from Harvard College and an MD from Harvard Medical School. After residency training at the University of California, San Francisco, he practiced neurosurgery in Topeka, Kansas for nearly 25 years. He lives in Topeka and makes coffee every morning for his wife, Mary. Their two sons are a blessing. He is a credible violinist and hits tennis balls with a passion. His memoir, Steep, is his first book. Welcome, Dr. Yorke.
Delighted to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here. I will say, just based on what I know about you and having read your book, that this about the author is an understated or very understated, but we will elaborate on that as we go. So let's start from the beginning. And that would be, can you give us the backstory of how you came to write the book?
Sure. It began as a letter to our sons to give them a sense of who their dad had been. Um, Issues that sometimes don't make it to the Thanksgiving dinner table or kind of get nudged aside at family reunions. So I was working along on that. And then Mary and I were in Washington, D.C., standing in line to get into the Black Smithsonian, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And as I stood there, I looked above the entry, and there were a few lines that just were hard to ignore. And let me just quote them to you. The
Please.
great power of history is that it lives inside us, controls us unconsciously.
Mm.
And I thought, this guy, James Baldwin, is writing to me. I mean, I'm his only audience. So that changed the direction of the writing. And as I kept writing, I I started to think about how we relate to our past. And I remembered a few lines that I wanted to include in the book but couldn't from a favorite poet uh, that kind of contradict Baldwin in a way. And the lines go like this. This is the use of memory for liberation, not less of love, but expanding of love beyond desire. And so liberation from the future as well as the past. So this letter was getting awfully long. Uh, and I'm working on it, working on it, working on it. And then the final event kind of was standing at a local bookstore looking at the Black Studies shelf. And I'm seeing big volumes, serious scholarship, bulletproof arguments, kind of horrific history. But, putting your doctor hat on, it was mostly diagnostic. This is what went wrong. There wasn't a lot of room for remedy, and there wasn't a lot of room for one guy in Kansas. And I thought, well, maybe if I write something well enough, it can be timely and it kind of can stretch this Black Studies shelf a little bit and maybe stretch its audience too. So that's the backstory of the book.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. And so when we talk about history, there's big history, like
Mhm.
what came before us, and
Mhm.
then there's our own individual history kind of
Mhm.
juxtaposed
Yeah.
in that backdrop, right?
Yep.
And that certainly was true for you as it
Yes.
relates to your parents,
Yes, indeed.
the history of Black history, but also your parents' history. And
That's
it
it.
occurred to me, sort of uh, on reflecting on this, is there's really some intergenerational trauma here. is there not?
Oh,
Um,
no, yeah, no
it,
question.
right. So let's talk a little bit about that
Yeah, yeah.
because of the impact that your parents had in their own history
Hmm.
and their own trauma.
Hmm.
It deeply impacted you. So tell us about your parents and
Um,
what that relationship was like in terms of their what they brought to the table in terms of their own history and how that impacted you.
sure. They were wounded by their experience in the early decades of the 20th century in Boston, and they treated that wound by forging their only kid, their unexpected kid with many medical problems and so forth, by forging that kid into a weapon against their experience, kind of a shield against their humiliation.
Mm.
And there was a lot of fusion in the family. The family was tight knit, almost too tight knit. There were, crazy expectations of what I could achieve. Um, there was a good deal of surrogacy, but there was also just fanatical love.
Mm.
Um, this was an intact family from the lower rungs, I would say, of the black middle class. This is not a ghetto story.
Mm.
It is not a story of black trauma porn or something. It is a story, whether you want to say seldom told or overlooked or whatever, it's a story from the black bourgeois, really.
Mm. So, would you mind talking just a little bit about some of their specific life experiences, fears, and dreams? When you talk about, bourgeois, your
Mhm,
parents were very involved in the community. They saw
mhm,
them, were
mhm,
they not, and saw
mhm,
themselves as
mhm,
sort of upwardly mobile? Would
mhm.
you say that?
Yeah, the upward mobility was fanatical, really.
Yeah.
Uh, my dad was born in 1912 in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and he and his two brothers were abandoned by their parents when he was 5. He began fending for himself in Boston at age 12 and knew the street very well, but also was fanatically driven to achieve some legitimate success. My mother was born in Newport News, Virginia
Mm.
in 1918, and the family came north in the Great Migration. Uh, she was attracted to my dad's ambition, uh, and that kind of set him apart from a lot of her other suitors. And they they struggled, I think, because neither had gone to college, and the reality of skin color, the reality of education, uh, really consigned them to a social class that they were not comfortable in. So part of my prime directive was to change that for the family.
And
And,
how was that to happen? What was what was the
well,
plan for that?
yeah. Well, in 1954, when I was 6, the family moved from uh, Roxbury, which is a tough neighborhood in Boston, to Stoughton, which was a GI Bill, blue collar, white town. And when my parents did that, the extended family was astounded. It was kind of going into harm's way. And my mother's brother offered my dad a pistol, because that was what was necessary, they thought. Anyway, I had something of a growing up in Stoughton, but at age 12, we came back to Boston and they enrolled me in a public school called Boston Latin School. If you're from New Hampshire, you may have
Hmm.
heard of it.
Hmm.
Anyway, the seventh grade was the most competitive year of my life. Uh, I learned a lot about how to persist. And between age 12, or the 7th grade and the 11th grade, I basically lived in a bunker. We had a small apartment, and every day was the same. Up before the sun, on the streetcar to school, back from school, homework until dinner, and then practicing the violin until bed.
Mm.
There wasn't a lot of opportunity to get beat up by the police or get into other problems because literally I was closeted. I was bunkered. Um, so that was the adolescence. In a sense, part of the price of the success I had was that uh, I didn't have a childhood, you know,
Mm.
and I was armored by experience, by credentials, by whatever, uh, into someone who was not in touch with the softer side of himself. So that's in a nutshell what went on from age 12 to 18.
Right. So the interesting use of the word bunker,
Mm,
because that connotes like being on the front lines or being always in
yeah,
danger.
yeah,
And
that is all
so,
true. Yeah.
so who built the bunker? You? Because this is what I'm curious about. Your parents kind of put you there, but it also had
They
protected
built
you,
it.
right?
Yeah, yes, indeed. They built it and they enforced it. And I was compliant for a number of reasons. First, I was an only child, so I was heavily scrutinized. Second, if I were to rebut their version of history, they had so much evidence of domestic terrorism, if you will, so much evidence of bigotry, so much evidence of danger, of leaving the narrow path, that it seemed reasonable to stay inside the bunker.
So when did you get out of the bunker? So this is what Ket got you
Yeah,
through.
yeah,
Was it
yeah.
before you went to Harvard? Was it after you went to Harvard? What did that evolution look like where you were able to?
There were long periods of moving forward one step at a time inside the bunker, and then moments of finding a fork in the road and moving toward, I guess, what a therapist might call individuation.
Mm.
A moment like that came when I left Boston in 1974 and went to San Francisco to do training in neurosurgery, residency. My residency advisor at Harvard was really skeptical of the idea that credible neurosurgical training could occur outside Boston, but I went off to San Francisco. And that was the beginning of seeing my past and my history in a new light. Second was meeting the love of my life in Haight-Ashbury uh, in 1976. Uh, that changed how I looked at the world and how I looked at my past. And finally, of course, uh, the decision to leave the academic escalator
Mm.
in 1980 and not take an assistant professor of neurosurgery job at UCLA or Emory or Pittsburgh and instead go to Topeka, Kansas. And I guess finally, no, not quite finally, but next would be my leaving the OR at age 54
Mm.
to test in real time, you know, whether I needed all this armor, all these
Right.
credentials.
Right.
And finally was the writing of the book. I mean, the book I can recommend to anybody wrestling with your past and
Mm.
snuggling up close to what hurts,
Mm.
because that's where you find the trailhead to the steep path to liberation.
Wow, I
I'm,
love
I'm
that.
not the, I'm not there. I'm not there. I've never met anybody who's there,
Yeah,
but I think I've seen the trailhead.
yes, yes. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. Let's start with the word steep because um, it's the title of your book. It's got more than one meaning. So let's just take a moment to talk about that just quickly. So,
Sure,
yeah.
sure, perfect. Yes, steep is an adjective. That is the expected memoir. That is the steep path of upward mobility from humble beginnings to some version of success. We all see many, many examples of that in the bookstores. Steep is also a verb meaning to mature, to come to fruition, what happens to a pot of tea. And for me, the more interesting challenge was working on the second meaning, because that's kind of what began when I left the OR
Mm.
uh, in my mid 50s.
So these crossroads that you were just talking about,
Mhm.
going out to San Francisco and then ultimately going to Topeka.
Correct.
So let's talk about that one because you're still there
I
and it
am.
obviously changed your trajectory
Yeah,
significantly.
it
So
did. It
why
did.
Topeka? What was involved in your decision-making process?
Part of it had to do with ethics, and part of it had to do with growing up. The ethical side of it was this. In 1979, I was the chief resident in neurosurgery at UC San Francisco. What that meant was that I took phone calls from all over the Bay Area uh, from other neurosurgeons asking to transfer patients to UCSF. And I noticed that on Friday afternoons, we would get a flood of calls. This didn't work out quite right. And, I need to leave town. Could you possibly take this patient? And it dawned on me that there were more neurosurgeons in the Bay Area than there were in the United Kingdom, which is a startling statistic. I don't know that that's still true, but it was true then. And these were not bad people, but they had expectations for what their income would be. And it turned out that they did enough surgery to create the income. The home in Tahoe and the German cars and all that stuff. So I was educated a little bit about the prosaic idea of supply and demand
Mm.
because these guys had a unique opportunity to create enough anxiety in their patients um, to kind of repeal that law of supply and demand. And I'm talking about spine surgery now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that led me to think about places that didn't have so many neurosurgeons, places where I could use this elite training that I had had and be conservative in how I approached patient illness and choices and so forth. The second part of it was growing up. Um, I had ascended multiple ladders of hierarchy. And as I was finishing residency, I looked at these assistant professor jobs, and it was kind of like one more hierarchy because there's the assistant, there's the associate, there's the professor, there's the chief of service, there's the dean, all that, on
Mm-hmm.
and on and on. So I thought maybe, at age 31, I could consider, growing up and kind of being an adult. It also helped that I was in love and I had just gotten married. And I thought, this is a time of life when one starts a family. And starting a family in San Francisco, I had a job offer there too, did not look propitious. It
Mm-hmm.
did not look good. There weren't many children there. Um, there was a lot of friction in daily life, getting from point A to point B, parking your car, paying for
Right.
things, even then was an issue. So those were the two strains that took us to Topeka.
Mm.
And honestly, Mary and I gave it 6 months when we got there. And what happened was life really began to roll easy for the new parents. We had our first son that next spring, 1981. It was easy to do everything in Topeka, still is.
Mm.
Grocery store, post office,
Mm.
hospital. It, it's just a lower population density. The neurosurgery was intense, no doubt about that. The illnesses were no different than they were in San Francisco, but
Yeah.
um, life was easier to manage. There was less
Mm.
friction getting through the day.
Wow. Wow. Who doesn't want that?
Mm,
Especially now.
indeed, indeed, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, what I'm hearing is a man with a heart. And I will say that I did watch the book launch interview at the Topeka Public Library, I think it was, which was standing room only and then some,
That
and
that was a
filled
shock.
with people who obviously love you and know you, a community.
Indeed, indeed. That
So that was
that was a,
really beautiful to see.
that was a shock. I had not understood, that I was part of such a community. You live your life day to day and you just don't think about these things. But having done many, many cases, not just in Topeka, but in the surrounding region, you have been in many family waiting rooms. You've been in many patient rooms. You've been to many soccer practices and many, high school concerts. And, you know, the idea of community actually is alive here, which is different from people who sometimes, who live in big cities. They don't know their neighbors and all the usual disadvantages of that kind of life.
Mm. So I'm just thinking about the words about history and living our history unconsciously, or it affects us
Mhm,
unconsciously, and then the
mhm,
idea of the liberation that comes from our history and our future.
mhm,
And
mhm,
it sounds like, notwithstanding the bunker and the what you were, the instructions you were given by your parents,
mhm.
you have been able to, and over time, liberated yourself from that history, which liberated you for your future. Is that fair to say?
Well, like I say, I am far from liberated. I think I've seen the trailhead and steep, you know, I have steeped some in the last 20 years, but I would not claim liberation.
Well, certainly
Uh,
you are more liberated having been in Topeka for the past 25 years or
yeah,
longer now
yeah,
than
yeah.
had you stayed in San Francisco.
You could be right about that. Um, I know that the experience has changed me. I know that it has been a good decision for us. Um, I know that it isn't memory so much that is liberating. It's how you relate to your memory.
Yeah.
How friendly you can get with the difficult parts of your past and the past.
Right.
And that continues to challenge me. I mean, we all have our triggers
Mm.
that can put up the armor again.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, I really have valued the process of sitting there, longhand, writing steep,
Mm.
and chewing on every word and remembering what Mark Twain said, that the right word is lightning and the
Mm.
almost right word is a lightning bug. Uh, and I really respect, have come to respect what poets do. I'm not a poet, but I really admire the economy in their language.
Mhm.
And I've produced a mercifully short book, in which every word is doing useful work and dancing nicely with all the others.
Oh, 100%. I mean, when I first saw the book and it didn't appear to be long, I thought, "Oh, but it is rich and it is every word." Yes. I mean, it's not like, "Oh, you just flip through it and breeze through it." It's rich, as I
Well,
said.
many
So,
thanks, many thanks.
so
Well,
one of the things that I wanted you to talk about is so when you were working in the lab with the mice
yeah,
and the cortex,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think so. I'm on page 59.
Oh, okay.
Um, but you were working on, and I can't, the technical part I
Yeah,
can't convey, but basically you were working on trying to see how these different cells work as they
yeah,
move through the brain or and you figured it out or at least you got a little glimpse and the
yeah,
quote that I want to recite and then you can talk about is you say the memory of that morning is perfectly clear after 50 years. Do you want to read it? Can you read that paragraph on
yeah,
my
sure.
Okay, thank you.
The memory of that morning is perfectly clear after 50 years. I had tasted the rigor of basic science and could now see it as more a way of thinking than a technology or a machine, as an eagerness to make one mistake after another, each a bit closer to the truth, a truth. I could also recognize sloppy thinking and lazy work. I would bring a discerning eye for junk science to every academic article and breathless breakthrough I would ever see.
Hmm. That, thank you. That an eagerness to make one mistake after another, each a bit closer to the truth. I feel like that is a really core, like beacon that you have maybe followed. Do you care to elaborate on that at all?
Well, that's what science is, that process of interrogating what you think you know and working hard to disprove it. And in the current media situation, we have scientific breakthroughs every day with crummy statistics and no follow up and no control groups. And, well, just as an example, um, do you live longer if you play tennis or pickleball? I mean, there are articles written about this. I mean, I don't know who pays for them, but you get what I mean. Are you
Yes,
better off eating, you
right,
know, grapes or pomegranates?
right.
Science is very powerful, but unless you can control variables, unless you can look over time, it's not a tool that will answer every question. In fact, a lot of questions you just can't answer with the scientific method.
Yes. I think what really captured my attention with that line though was the idea of making mistakes and a
Hmm.
willingness to make them. I had heard
Hmm.
it said or read it somewhere, the concept that Thomas Edison would never the light bulb, just as an example, would never have been invented if he wasn't willing to have all the ones that didn't work
Hmm.
before
Yeah, yeah,
getting to the one that worked.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's about this turning away from failure, but failure is the road to success.
And success is transient.
Right.
Success is never permanent. Just the other great example of that people talk about is the product WD-40.
Oh, right.
It was named for the 39 failures.
I never knew that.
Learn
I never
something new every
knew.
day.
Yes. Yes, but it's totally on point.
Yeah.
So, and certainly the whole idea of success in your life, I imagine has changed just by what you've experienced and what you describe about your experiences.
Yeah, as I look back, I have been blessed and incredibly successful, although not, I didn't deserve it. We have two incredible sons. And just as an aside, there are two things missing in the book. First is the quote from that poet from St. Louis, T.S. Eliot,
Mhm.
that I mentioned before. And second is boasting about our sons, because they had final edits on the book and they said, nope, you can't say that. This is your story, you know. So that was an element of success. Another element of success was the privilege of being up close to my fellow Kansans in the peaks and valleys of their journeys.
Yeah.
Um, it was an enormous education for a young man. I mean, I had that experience, and I hope that I got some of its meaning.
Mm.
Uh,
It was also a huge responsibility. I mean, you write about in the book some of the surgeries and the intensity of the surgeries, and some
mhm,
went were successful and
mhm, mhm.
some were not.
Yeah.
Um, and how did you cope with that? I mean, how did you move through the world with some degree of comfort and ease with that much responsibility on your shoulders?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that if you talk to most people who do this kind of work, they'll talk about their training. And your training hardens you in a way. And the challenge is to preserve some of yourself behind the armor of the surgeon. I mean, I like to talk about an existential ballet. I
Mm.
mean, some of the surgery was like that. I mean, life, death,
Yeah.
existential ballet. Um, but I think being in a community helped. I think that my history helped. My history as a Black American helped some. You know, to be able to summon a bit of compassion when it mattered, to kind of exchange places with the person on the examining table. That helped a little bit, I think. And some of it was just dumb luck.
Mm. So this is sort of this is one of the questions I had for you. How did you cope? And then there were scenes where you were looking up at the night sky. And so my question was, when you looked up at the night sky, were you able to see anything beyond being a mere mortal? So I think you probably get what I mean. Like, when was there something bigger than you that you were able to sort of surrender into, or I,
Well, I will say that awe can sneak up on us. It can kind of explode our persona. And yeah, I looked at the night sky that night just after having operated on the 5-year-old kid next door who had a big brain problem. Uh, and as I looked up, I was trying to get into the moment so I could get a little bit of sleep between 3 a.m. and 5:30. But yeah, I think that there are moments of awe, moments of the sublime, whether it's grotesque or beautiful. I talk about that a little bit, hiking through the Grand Canyon.
yes.
I talk about it looking down the barrels of the microscope after a really tough brain tumor that I took out. Yeah, there are moments of awe. And as you wake up, as you become more alert to yourself, your history, uh, how transient you are, those moments of awe come more often.
Mhm.
And, the truly liberated person is one who lives in a state of awe a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
Mm.
That's not me.
Mm. I love that. I don't think it's most of us. Um, what is it that you hope your readers will take away from the experience of your book?
Good question. I'll start by talking about a heated conversation that I had with our younger son. He was 14, already bigger than me. He was 6'3". And I was telling him what he should do, what he should do with his homework and this and that.
Mm.
He came right up to me and he said, "Dad, do not tell me what to do. Tell me what you did,"
Mm.
which stopped the conversation. I mean, I had nothing to say.
Wow.
Uh, anyway, if you push me, I will say that the takeaway is to wake up, to pay close attention to your history, to your past, to what hurts,
Mm.
because that's how you become conscious of it. That's how you reply to James Baldwin. That's how you soften the voice of the past. And
Mm.
that's how you begin to get a whiff of freedom.
Mm. Beautiful.
That's one
Beautiful.
guy's opinion.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And how do we get your book?
Excellent question. The book is Steep. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Ingram. It's available on Goodreads. Uh, any bookstore in North America can get it, can order it for you because it's on Ingram Spark.
All right. And you have a website? Do you have a
I
website?
do, yes. It's a very complex website. It's called CraigYorke.com, and York
Okay.
is with an E.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much. The book is wonderful. It's written beautifully. It's full of wisdom and amazing experiences and history as well. So thank
Professor
you.
Landry, it's been a pleasure running my mouth for however long we've been talking.
It's been a pleasure to listen
All
and
right.
share with others.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Okay.
Take good
Adios.
care.
Bye bye.